They often said love was a beautiful thing, and in Ethan and Vanessa, people believed they had seen proof of it. For 5 years, theirs was the kind of relationship people assumed would end in marriage. They were close, deeply involved in each other's lives, and easy to admire. Their families approved. Their friends admired them. In town, people no longer wondered if they would marry, but when. They were not miserable people struggling to survive. They lived well enough for Ethan to believe they were building something real. And Ethan loved Vanessa in ways that had nothing to do with money. He worked a regular day job, spent his nights studying financial markets, and still stayed up even later whenever Vanessa needed help with interviews, presentations, or simply needed him present. He was tired often, but never too tired for her. Vanessa knew that. She knew how often he gave up his own rest for her. She knew how serious he was about the future he kept talking about. And for a long time, she believed in it too. That was why no one saw the change coming. Nothing had broken between them. No betrayal, no scandal, no great collapse. What changed was Vanessa. Slowly, the life they shared stopped feeling beautiful to her. What once felt enough began to feel small. People around her were moving faster, getting engaged, buying homes, posting polished lives. And little by little, one fear began to take hold of her. What if Ethan's future took too long? What if she spent her best years waiting for a life that never fully arrived? What if love was real, but not enough to protect her from regret? Ethan noticed none of it. Then one day, Vanessa suggested they go on a date. She chose a 5-star restaurant they had never been to before. Ethan was surprised, but he agreed, thinking she simply wanted a special evening together. The moment they stepped inside, he felt the difference. The polished quiet, the elegance, the kind of room where everything seemed expensive. Still, he stayed composed. He sat straight, spoke calmly, and acted like he belonged there, even though inside he was already calculating what the night would cost him. He refused to let that discomfort show. Vanessa noticed. She looked across the table and said, almost casually, "You're uncomfortable." Ethan gave a faint smile. "I'm all right." She shook her head. "No, you're not. I can tell." "It's just not the kind of place we usually come to," he said. Vanessa glanced around the restaurant, then back at him. "And don't you think that says something?" Ethan frowned. "About what?" "About us." That was the moment the evening changed. He looked at her more carefully. "Vanessa?" She folded her hands on the table and held his gaze. "I don't want to keep living like this." He went still. "Living like what?" "Always being careful, always watching what we spend, always waiting for someday to become our life." Her voice was calm, but empty of softness. "I'm tired of waiting for a future that still feels far away." Ethan stared at her, trying to catch up with the moment. "You knew who I was from the beginning," he said quietly. "Yes, and for a long time I believed in it. I believed in you. But I can't keep living on promises. Vanessa, we're doing fine." That was what made her next words hurt so much. "Fine is no longer enough for me." Silence settled between them. Then she said it. "I want to move on, Ethan." He looked at her for a long moment, as if waiting for the woman he knew to return to her face. She never did. And that was when Ethan understood this had never been a date. It was a farewell. Ethan left the restaurant with the kind of numbness that comes when pain lands too deep to process at once. He got home, took off his coat, sat at the edge of his bed, and replayed every word until morning. Nothing in the world had changed, and yet for him, everything had. He did not go looking for answers Vanessa had already made clear. The hurt made him quiet, and from that night on, something in him carried a bruise. Still, Ethan did what wounded people often do when life gives them no room to collapse. He kept going. He still had to wake up, still had to go to work, still had to function in a world that had no reason to slow down for heartbreak. And at night, when silence settled in, her words returned. "Fine is no longer enough for me." That was the sentence that stayed with him. He kept studying financial markets. He kept making the small trades he had already been testing for some time. The profits were modest, but steady enough to prove one thing. He was getting better. One afternoon, a colleague noticed his trading notes and was struck by how precise they were. That conversation led Ethan to a smaller investment firm willing to test him. He passed. They started him with a few accounts and watched what he would do. Ethan did not trade for attention, he traded for results. He protected capital, stayed disciplined, and built trust. Small accounts became larger ones brought bigger responsibilities. Over the years, Ethan kept rising. He joined the senior team, earned equity through performance, and slowly stepped into the life he had always believed was possible. The future Vanessa had grown tired of waiting for arrived the way real futures usually do, not all at once, but step by step. And though life moved forward, some part of that old wound stayed with him. The knowledge of what it feels like to be loved while you are useful, but doubted while you are still becoming. Vanessa moved on too. From the outside, her life looked like the one she thought she wanted. Brighter spaces, more polished company. She was with a man named Damien Cross, who moved easily through money, access, and expensive rooms. Years later, Damien brought her to a major Wall Street gala, one of those private evenings where senior financiers, senior leaders, and major investors gathered under one roof. Inside the hall stood a polished donor wall carrying the names of market leaders tied to the institution. Vanessa glanced at it, then stopped. Near the top was a name she knew, Ethan Cole. For a second, she thought she had read it wrong, but she hadn't. Ethan had arrived. He walked in with the calm ease of a man who had earned his place there. People greeted him warmly, hands reached for his, conversations opened around him. It was clear he was one of the evening's highlights, and what struck her most was not just that he had made it, it was how natural he looked there, as if the life he had once carried in quiet faith had finally caught up with him. Then he saw her. His face opened in genuine surprise. "Vanessa," she smiled, almost breathless. "Ethan, wow." He laughed lightly and stepped closer. "It's really you." And for a moment, everything around her softened. After all those years, he was still Ethan, warm and cheerful. "You've changed so much," she said softly. He smiled. "I'd hope so." "No, I mean, look at you." He laughed again. "I'm looking at you too." For one brief moment, Vanessa let herself stand in that warmth. She told him how incredible he looked, how unreal it felt to see him there. And as she stood beside him, hearing others mention his name with respect, she felt a certain kind of loss. She admired him, the discipline, the calmness, the man time had revealed. And somewhere in that brief moment, she wanted to remain near him. But the moment was already slipping. People kept coming to greet Ethan, and in the mix, he was pulled away. And standing there while people drew him from her, she understood something with painful clarity. He had simply grown beyond the place where she left him, and she was no longer part of it. That was the twist she never imagined years ago in that restaurant. Ethan was still warm enough to remind her why she had loved him, and yet she no longer had any place in that life. She had known him before the world did, when all he had was love, discipline, and a future not yet visible. But she could not honor it then, and now the world could. Some people only recognize value after the room had already recognized it, but real worth begins long before that.